Welcome to the final video of the Week 6 lecture content for HEA 10002. In this final video, we're going to consider the environmental determinants of health. Importantly, environmental determinants are not separate to the social determinants of health. They are interwoven. Social factors, for example, living in poverty, increases your exposure to environmental risk factors. Social and environmental determinants of health are interlaced to the point that you can't often disentangle them. A really narrow definition of what we mean by the environmental determinants of health appears in this slide here, and that is the chemical, biological, and physical agents that impact health. So what are some examples of environmental conditions that affect health? Some examples include air quality, water quality, waste disposal, housing conditions, for example, overcrowded living conditions, climate change, and occupational risks. Environmental determinants are really critical to health outcomes. Almost 1/4 of deaths in 2012, or based on data presented in 2012, were attributed to the environment. More than 1/4 of all deaths in children under the age of 5 were preventable if environmental risks were removed. A statistic that relates to what we spoke about in our previous video on sanitation. This next dot point here is really important to know for your next quiz. Environmental determinants are most significant when it comes to discussion of stroke, heart disease, diarrhea, and cancer. If we look at each of these health conditions, which these next few slides are getting you to do, we see that the diseases with the highest preventable burden from environmental factors are lower respiratory infections and diarrheal diseases. And the specific environmental determinants of these conditions include secondhand tobacco smoke, air pollution, inadequate water, and inadequate sanitation. The next few slides present statistics on other health conditions and outline the specific environmental determinants that relate to malaria, cancer, depression, cardiovascular disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, asthma, musculoskeletal diseases, and unintentional injuries or road traffic accidents. What stages of the lifespan do you think are most or more at risk of environmental impacts? Importantly, certain cohorts are more susceptible to the environmental determinants of ill health and disease. Children under the age of 5 and adults aged 50 and above. Do you think gender has an impact? If so, how and why? Sex or gender is also a critical determinant of who and how people are affected by the environment. People assigned male at birth are slightly more affected by the environment than people assigned female at birth. And as this slide goes on to describe, this has to do with occupational hazards, with increased risk of injury and death relating to work and recreational activities for people assigned male at birth. Interestingly, we see an overall trend, a shift from infectious communicable diseases to non-communicable diseases within our environments. However, this slide was written in a pre-COVID era. We can safely say that non-communicable diseases such as depression have increased globally. This slide to me reads a little bit like a quiz. Diseases with the strongest environmental contributions appear on screen and include, for example, stroke, diarrheal diseases, lower respiratory infections, cancer, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. We will complete this activity that is based at the bottom of the slides in our next class. This concludes the video content for week 6 of HEA 10002. I look forward to seeing you in class.